In this lesson, we're going to create the shelf and some books. So what we'll do is we're going to create a cube, and so just make sure you're outside of the wall object here, because if I was in here, if I pressed tab and I was in here and I pressed shift A to create something, or if I came over here and said create cube, then basically this would be inside the object. So if I were to come out of here, that's basically considered all one object. This object here is called ground 1 because we duplicated the ground. So let's just rename that for now. Double click, wall, and that's fine. Okay, so now what we've got here is the cube is part of that object. Okay, so we don't want that. Just going to undo that. And so what we'll do is just undoing there. Control Z on the keyboard is undo. What we'll do is we're going to create a cube, and we're going to could line this up by hand from the top view, but instead of that, what we can do is just use our, let's press 5 again just to come out of this mode. So what we can do instead is basically use the snapping. So let's turn snapping on. So you're going to click on this, and then we're going to use the face snapping. Okay, so it's going to snap to the face of this object. So let's create a cube. So I'm in the create tab here, click on create, and we've got our cube there. And what we'll do is just use the manipulator here and just drag it, and you can see that it actually stops when it gets to the face there, which is really cool. So it's got some ray casting, and it basically knows when it hits the wall, and that's pretty handy. If you want it to snap to the actual pivot point, so you can see this is the pivot point, the origin is called in Blender, and you can use the button here to actually snap to the pivot point if you want to. So if you click on this, it's going to go further inside and actually snap to the middle of that. So I'm just going to turn that off. We don't want that in this case. I'm just going to come out and go back in again. So now you can see we've got our cube on the wall there. This is going to be our shelf. So I'm just going to move it over here. I'm just using the manipulator for the translate. If you're not on translate, you just click on translate down here, just a reminder. And what we can do is just scale this. So let's just take the scale, and we'll scale it in the Z axis and the Y, and let's move it over again, and then let's scale it again. Okay, something like that. We'll use our move again. So it's really easy to use, and let's just move it up a bit. Okay, so there we've got our shelf. Let's rename that to shelf. I've just undid my renaming, so I'm just going to type in wall again for my walls, and for this guy I want it to be called shelf. Always good to be organized so that when you look down here you know exactly what the object is over here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create some books on there. So what I'm going to do is create another cube. So just grab a cube, just use the snapping to take that over. The face snapping should still be on, so whatever you click on is going to line it up with that. So I've clicked on here, so it's lined it up, the top up with that thing. So what we can do is just carry on. Let's just move it over here. Okay, and then what you can do is move it down, and it will place it onto the shelf there. Okay. All right. Let's scale this down. So I'm just going to use a scale and scale this way. Just going to turn off snapping here. It keeps snapping to the wall, so it might get a bit annoying. So now you can work on this. Let's just zoom in here. To frame your selection, you can go to view selected. Okay, it's going to zoom in there. If you've got a full keyboard, you can press the full stop on the numpad and it's going to zoom in. If you've got a laptop, you'll have to just go to the menu here. You can remap that, but I'm not going to do that right now. So let's just go in here and use our translate. turn on the snapping again. There we go. Okay, so let's put a bit of detail in here. I'm just going to adjust this a bit in a moment. So let's just take these faces here, and what we're going to do is we're going to inset those faces, and then we're going to extrude them in just to give the effect of a cover and some pages inside. Okay, so we'll just grab those faces. I'm going to press tab, click on these faces. In fact, if I come out of here, if I press tab again, what you can do is you can go to Object, Show Hide, and Hide Unselected, and that's just going to clear your view up for you. To bring that back, you can just press Alt H on the keyboard, or you can go back to that menu and pick on Show Hidden. Okay, so what we've got now is just a little bit easier to select. So I press tab, and then I can hold down Shift and carry on selecting my faces. So make sure you've got those 3 faces selected. Then we can press I on the keyboard to inset those faces, or you can come in here and say Insert here, this one here. Press I, and then I'm just going to bring those in a little bit. Okay, if you want to pick the exact amount, I normally have offset even on. Yours might be off. Okay, and let's just change the thickness a little bit. Don't want that cover to be too thick, so I'm just making it maybe a little bit thinner. Although we're going to be quite far out, so it's good to have something in there that you can see. So we're going to extrude these in, and what we can do is use extrude along the normals, or we can use inset faces. Okay, so I could use extrude with vertex normals, but I'm just going to use inset faces because we used I earlier. So I'm just going to press I, and you can see it's going to try and inset that. We don't want any inset, so just drag it up so that there's no inset, and make sure that's on 0. But the depth you can actually slide up and make some depth to it. So we're going to make a minus number, and we'll just bring that in a little bit just so that it gives you a little bit of thickness. And I would recommend inset because it's a bit more even. When you use vertex normals using extrude, it looks a little bit uneven. It kind of comes in a little bit, which you don't want. So this is a bit more even, so it looks nicer. Okay, so now we've finished adjusting the shape of that. We can scale it or do whatever we want to and duplicate this. So I'm just going to come out of here, press tab, press Alt H to bring everything else back. So there we are, and then we can select our object here, and let's just use the scale S, and I'm just going to use the scale in the Y direction. Press Y on the keyboard, and then scale it to about there. Don't want it to be too thick. And then we'll just do scale again, and we're going to go in the X direction. If you forget which direction, you can just look at this little thing here, and then click there. So we could just move that along. I'm going to turn off snapping. So I'm just going to scale this down a bit, maybe S to scale, and just overall scale it down a bit like that, and turn snapping back on. Okay, there we go. Alright, so I'm going to save this here. I'm going to say File, Save As, and press plus.